عليكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وسواتنا محمد المصطفى وعلى آله الأصفياء وصحبه الأتقياء والتابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الجزاء. اللهم انصر إخوانا في غزة وفلسطين ولبنان والعراق واليمن وفي كل مكان يا أكرم الأكرمين. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. Brothers and sisters in Islam, we're going to begin. And who is meant to be here at this time is here. And I'm never overly concerned about having a big crowd, or even if it's only one person. We should try to make it a habit of starting things on time. And then irrespective of how many people are in here, we know that the Malaika are a witness to the event, to any of the gatherings of dhikr, or remembrance of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and His Habib, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and in there's blessing. So this topic is probably one of the most timely topics to discuss, especially right now. And within this discussion of the prophetic way of activism, and we've gone over the issue of enjoining good and forbidding evil. That's what we went over 2 weeks ago. Last week we didn't have a session. But it's the etiquettes, or the adab, of enjoining the good and forbidding evil are extremely important. Not just the maqsid, or the objective, but also the means in trying to reach the objective are very important. And unfortunately, right now, what we see in the community, unfortunately, by some of the people in my generation, your parents' generation, older, and my parents' generation, is that we've seen a breakdown of adab in the community, especially in terms of this November election that's coming up next week, exactly a week from the day, where we see false information being put out, people being overly judgmental, and even some, like, I'll even say low-key takfir going on, even to the extent in the community and WhatsApp groups and social media. So I think it's very important for us as students of knowledge and as people who are seeking to please Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that we get reminded of, or if not, learn the adab of enjoining good and forbidding evil, which also relates to adab al-ikhtilafat, or the manners of disagreement. The manners of disagreement, which our scholars have written about, going back to the manners of disagreement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he dealt with people who disagreed with him, and not even disbelievers within Quraysh, not even Jews like a Bani Qaynuqa, a Bani Qurayza, not even Christians like from Najran, even sometimes when the Sahaba themselves, may Allah be well pleased with them, even sometimes questioned the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or hesitated in fulfilling the commands that he gave. Like prime example was when he went to go make Umrah in the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. I mean, there were 2 instances where there were companions who literally disagreed with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam openly. How did he deal with that? So we need to be reminded of these lessons. So everything in Islam has al-adab. Everything has manners. And adab is a sign of emotional intelligence. Like someone who's learned in letters, we call this person in Arabic adib, or a female adiba, right? So there's also a person adab besides manners or comportment is even related to when people talk about a certain level, high level of poetry is also called adab. Isn't that right? And adab, how I was taught the meaning of it, adab is to give everyone and everything their appropriate due at the appropriate place and time. To give everyone and everything its proper due at place and time. So I say everything. Number one, we're supposed to have adab with the Quran. I mean, fiqh speaking, like the being state of tahara, right? But it's not proper adab, for instance, to leave the Quran, a mushaf on the floor. It's not proper adab to, let's say you have a bookshelf of like 3 levels on your bookshelf and you put a mushaf at the very bottom and you put other books over top the Quran. That's bad adab with the Quran, for instance, right? The first one that we have adab with is with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And a person who doesn't have adab with Allah will not have proper adab with people. We have adab in salah, right? I saw one time I was watching a video and I noticed that during a prayer I was looking and I saw somebody standing in the prayer line and I guess their phone rang and they went to like hit their phone sound, look at their phone and like low key like scrolled for a quick second during salah. That's not proper adab of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in salah, right? Some fuqaha would maybe even say there's salah batila. Maybe they void their salah out and need to do it again just for even doing that. There's difference of opinion on that, right? But it is to say, there's adab with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So giving everyone their proper due at place and time. For instance, brothers, we're supposed to have adab, proper adab with all women, right? But you have different adab with your mother than you do with your little sister. And you have different adab with your khaltu or your khala, I think you say in Urdu. You have different adab with your auntie than you would have with a random sister in MSA. You have different adab, right? But you show respect to all of those women. All women deserve respect, but the level of adab with those women are different, right? And this is a sign of social intelligence. Likewise, in our activism, we have to have emotional intelligence, or it's also called intrapersonal intelligence. And a book written about this was Sheikh Mikael Smith, who teaches at Cullum Institute down in Texas. He wrote a book called The Emotional Intelligence of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's a good book for you to read. The Emotional Intelligence of the Prophet Alaihi Salatu Wasallam. Likewise, in this endeavor, we have to have adab in our activism and community organizing under the rubric of enjoining good and forbidding evil. So you may have all heard the saying of Malcolm X. As a Sunni, not the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, rahimahullah ta'ala, said, by any means necessary. How have you heard that saying before? Okay. We have to put that saying in context. By any means necessary that coincides with the Sharia and prophetic adab. Not by simply any means necessary at any cost or any means. No, that wouldn't be Islamic. That would be outside the Sunnah, the Quran and Sunnah. So we have to hold ourselves accountable, number one, in regards to adab, right? So we need to be mindful, firstly, of our tone. I know I've heard this phrase recently when people talk about, oh, don't tone police. You're tone policing me. Well, number one, as Muslims, just generally speaking, if a believer, Muslim brother or sister, generally is giving us some nasiha about how we're showing up in our adab, we shouldn't say stop tone policing. El Muslimu mir'atul Muslim. Min aqwal Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Muslim is the mirror of the other Muslim, right? So maybe if we're acting a certain way, maybe we can't see ourselves, and maybe our brother and sister is trying to politely tell us how we're showing up. It's kind of like in order to see how I look right now, if I'm not in front of a mirror or a screen, if something's out of place, you would have to tell me something's out of place, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't know. Like if I have some lint on my face or whatever, right? And you could tell me. And this is very important, especially when we're trying to counter anti-Muslim bigotry or racial bigotry, and for that matter, speak out against genocide. We don't want to turn people away in the name of having bad adab. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala calls us towards this because we can't be guilty of what we indict others who perpetrate injustice. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala asked a rhetorical question in the Quran. تَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala asked a question in the Quran. It's a rhetorical question. And basically, when Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala asks these types of questions, the Mufassirin say these questions are asked to a group of people to basically check them about a deficiency that exists amongst them. It's a deficiency. Do you enjoin righteous conduct for other people, yet you don't practice it yourselves? While you recite El-Kitab, the scripture, Afala Taqilun, don't you have any intelligence? Allah said, don't you have any sense? Right? So this is something that we have to be aware of. And this was something that the Salaf al-Salih, it was common that they would recite a dua, that they would say that they sought refuge with Allah, that they would not be of those who enjoin people towards el-bir, towards righteousness, yet didn't practice it themselves, right? So we have to enjoin this adab upon ourselves, firstly. And we have adab with people, even when they lack adab with us. We're supposed to have proper manners with other people, even if their manners are subpar, because they are not our standard. They are not our standard, right? Also, in this manner, in this endeavor, there's a comprehensive ayah of Quran that you all should memorize. It's a very short ayah. It only has 3 commands in it. And many scholars, including from the early generations of Muslims, said this one ayah best represents what's called makarimul akhlaq, or noble traits of character, in times specifically of contention. Because see, it's really good. It's really easy to have good adab or manners when everyone's your friend, when everyone agrees with you. But what happens when someone vehemently disagrees with you or us? They have hostility towards us. They take a position that is detrimental to the Muslims. This is when our adab is tested, not when everything is nice and everything is smooth. Our adab is tested for sure in these types of situations. So in Surah Al-Ahraf, is Surah number 7, Ayah 199. There's three commands. Khudul af, wa'ma bil arf, wa'adrid an al jahilin. 3 commands in one ayah, but very comprehensive. The first is take to pardoning. The tartib of this is important, by the way. Take the pardoning, then what? Then enjoin el-urf. El-urf in this ayah means el-mahruf, means that which is good. And we defined that in the last session. Take the pardoning, Number two, enjoying good, the good proven standards. And then number three, and then disengage from ignoramuses or ignorant people. So this is a level of how we deal with people on a one-on-one basis when there's hostility on a one-on-one basis. Let's say at a debate, at a protest, in some sort of action, right? So number one, khudu'af. Scholars say that this relates to or can relate to generosity. So al-afu is means pardoning. It can also relate to generosity. So it relates to we should be generous if the first time we are engaging with someone, and this can be inside of our community too, but we're engaging people on something we vehemently disagree, but we should give that person the benefit of the doubt, and especially when it's a Muslim, we should have husnul dhan for the Muslim. In other words, we shouldn't question their intentions, right? Imam Shafi, rahmatullahi alayh, he said that we judge by what is bidhahir. We judge by what is apparent. And it is only Allah who truly knows what's secret, what's inside the hearts of people. We can't judge hearts, right? We can't judge intentions. We can look at impact, but we can't judge people's intentions off the rip. Now, if we see a certain pattern of behavior over time and someone is like doing tasdeeq or they're affirming their behavior with their speech, then you should believe them. Like when 45, who's running for president, when he tells you certain things, you probably should believe what he says about these people and that people. Why? Because he's proven himself. Like he wants to build a wall, and he's called people this and this. So then when he repeats things and calls people about, calling people vermin, or they're poisoning the blood of the country, believe what he says, right? This is not an endorsement for or against anyone, by the way. I'm just using 45 as an example. So we're generous with people. Okay, assume a person doesn't know a different position. So then the next command is enjoying good, el mahruf. Scholars said this is done, bilin wa rifq, is in a moderate tone, and also that it's with a level of kindness. It's a level of kindness. This is the adab that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, by the way, commanded Musa alayhi salam wa Harun alayhi salam when they first engaged the worst tyrant on earth, Fir'aun, the worst tyrant mentioned by name in Quran of human beings. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala said, فَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. Allah commanded Musa and Harun alayhi salam, when you go to Fir'aun, speak to him in a moderate tone, least he may remember or fear, right? So he's the worst of the worst. Believe me, most people that we disagree with on campus or even on the political level in America, for the most part, they're nowhere worse than Fir'aun, mentioned in the Quran. Fir'aun said, by the way, he made a statement worse than Iblis. He's qala ana rabbukum a'la. Fir'aun said, I am the most high Lord. Iblis didn't even make a statement like that. He is the epitome of takabbur, of arrogance, right? So we might disagree with Big Gretch, for instance, but she's not as bad as Fir'aun. Just using her as an example, right? Or whoever is a politician that we engage and we disagree with them on X, Y, Z or X, Y, Z issues. So we say, okay, this person probably doesn't know. Okay, then you come and you talk to them kindly, not in a loud tone, not yelling, not shouting, not using profanity, and not calling people bad names. It's all built into the meaning. when we enjoin good and forbidding evil. And the second command in this is to not come to people and seek to disrespect them or for personal attacks. Why? Because let's say someone came to you to try to convince you of something and called you a name. Would you be very responsive to what they're trying to talk with you about or convince you? Absolutely not. You're probably gonna get angry and your defenses are gonna go up and your ears are gonna shut. You're gonna be like in fight or flight mode, right? Likewise, we need to remember this. If we're trying to convince people for the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala about something relating to the truth, that's clearly the truth, then we do this in a moderate tone. Quick story. One of my friends, he went to Al-Azhar. Some of you all were very young at the time of this, maybe not even start elementary school yet, or maybe in that grade. So there was a coup in Egypt, and there were some unarmed protesters that were killed in Cairo, and actually knew one of the unarmed protesters that was killed by the Egyptian army. I knew this brother. It was after Muhammad Mursi, Allahumma rahamhu, was deposed and put in jail. So I called Jaysh al-Misri, the Egyptian government. I was referring to a friend of mine. I called them kilab, or dogs. And my friend who went to Azhar, he says, Sidi Dawood, don't insult the dogs like that. He said, don't insult the dogs like that. But now I wouldn't have gone to the face of the Egyptian army and called them dogs, because I'd be shot too, right? The point of it is that we have to be careful about the words and language we use. Even some people, because I knew people at the time, I was talking to him, but I knew people at the time that were sympathetic towards the Egyptian army, by the way, because that issue split many people in the Egyptian American community, right? So anyway, we need to be careful about our language and our tone. The third step is, well, adr al-jahilin. Let's say you are engaging someone in a cause in activism. Okay, you give them the benefit of doubt. Okay, you engage them, they engage them, you engage them, and then their ignorance is not just simple ignorance, because we all have ignorance. Meaning, there's all things that we don't know, and we will all die with not knowing the majority of things that exist in this world, right? This is called al-jahl basit in Arabic. But there's a different type of jahl. Al-jahl murakkab. It's like complex or compounded ignorance. And this is the type of ignorance that when a person doesn't know and they think that they know, and when they try to, and when they are corrected, they double down in their ignorance. A person that cannot be corrected when they're in an incorrect position and they don't know. And this type of person will get belligerent or even start making up things and lying to justify their ignorant position. It's called jahl murakkab. If a person that you are engaging in a social political discussion, or it could even be on an institutional level, a person, it gets to this particular point where it becomes hostile to the point where the person begins to insult you, call you names, and this is a type of rhetorical violence, or escalates it to it could be some physical violence. Well, adr al-jahilin, the Quran says, then you disengage from people who are steeped in compound or complex ignorance. You disengage. You don't continue to engage them. Explanation of this ayah was given by two of the khulafa. The first, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, he said, do not debate with al-jahil. Do not debate with an incessant ignoramus. He said, least you shall be defeated by their ignorance. How do we get defended by an ignoramus? Is because when we continue to engage them, and they are insulting or gets belligerent, we can end up lowering ourselves down to their level. It ends up being a nefs against a nefs. It's an ego against the ego, right? And one of the acronyms, one of my mentors told me back in the 90s, he said that ego is an acronym for easing God out. It stops being about Allah. It starts being about God. It starts being about your own ego or my nefs. Not about what's right. It's about this ego. Su ego es no su amigo, right? So that's the wrong. That's the first thing. The second is Al Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, Al Khalifatul Rashid, the fourth Khalifa. He said, "Do not debate with." He used a different word from El Jahil. It's El Ahmaq, has a similar meaning. Basically, it's a loudmouth fool. Don't debate with an Ahmaq. If you ever watched Ertugrul, Resurrection of Ertugrul, you hear the word Ahmaq because the Turks absorbed this Arabic word into Turkish. Do not argue with a loudmouth fool. He said, lest the people may make a mistake in distinguishing between the two of you, right? Meaning that if there's someone who's a loudmouth fool, who's being ignorant, they're yelling at you, they're acting ignorantly, and you're going and disengaging, people are going to look and say, so he's acting like a fool, she's acting like a fool. Now, they don't know your state, but if you get down in the mud with someone acting like a pig, you're going to get up smelling like a pig. Then they're going to say, oh, both of those are fools, even if the position that you're arguing is correct. We end up lowering ourselves down to a level of a jahil or an ahmaq. And that's below the character of a Muslim. We're not supposed to behave with people like that or advocate like that. So this is a guiding principle. Surah Al-Ahraf, Ayah 199. Khudu'af, wa'ma bil'urf, wa'adrid anil jahilin. All right, this is an important point. An example, we'll give you an example from the Sunnah. Actually, we'll give two examples. This first example I didn't mention in my book, but it's a well-known story. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq was one day sitting with the Prophet alayhi salam, and there were some other companions. And this one guy from Medina walked up to Abu Bakr and he started yelling at him and started cussing at him. And Abu Bakr was sitting down next to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the Prophet was just looking at the guy when he was cussing out Abu Bakr, and he just was like grinning. He didn't say anything. And Abu Bakr stayed patient for a while. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam was smiling. And Abu Bakr basically lost his cool, and he raised his voice and started cussing out the guy, started cussing him out back. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his smile immediately went off his face. He frowned and he got up and started walking quickly away from the gathering, from the majlis. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu stood up and ran behind the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, when this guy came at me yelling and cussing me out, you just sat there and smiled. When I said something back, you got up and got angry with me and you walked away. Al-Habib sallallahu alayhi wasallam looked at Abu Bakr directly in his face and said, when you were staying quiet, an angel was responding upon your behalf. But when you went and got loud and started cussing him out, Shaitan, the Satan, came in this gathering and sat down. And by Allah, prophets are forbidden to sit in the gatherings where Shaitan, where the devil sits. I am forbidden to sit in this majlis. And that's why he got up and left. The second example is, we know that there were some people of the book that were politically hostile towards the Muslims in El Medina. We know the names of some of these tribes. I mentioned two of them earlier. Bani Qainuqa was one of them. Bani Qurayza was the other. Bani Kainuqa wa Bani Qurayza. These were the two most hostile tribes to the Sahaba in El Medina. So what these men did, they would curse the Prophet alayhi salam, and at the same time, they would mock the Muslim greeting. So the Muslim greeting is, of course, Assalamu alaikum. So they would drop the lam before the alif, and they would say Assalamu alaikum. So the hadith sahih, narrated by Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala and others, Imam al-Bayhaqi, several of the books of kutub of hadith narrate this with different wording. So these people would say to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Assalamu alaikum, death be upon you. Assalamu alayka ya Abu Qasim, death be upon you, O Prophet. One day his wife, our mother, Aisha radiallahu anha, was with the Prophet alayhi salam. And these men said to the Prophet, death be upon you. Aisha got angry. She responded back to them, and death be upon you, and God's curse, his latna and his ghadab and his wrath, his anger. She went even 2 times further. Wa alaykum salam wa la'natullahi wa ghadabullahi alaykum. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مهلا يا عائشة إن الله رفيق يحب الرفق في أمر كله أو إن الله رفيق يحب الرفق ويؤتي الرفق ما لا يؤتي العنف. So he said, calm down, Aisha, basically chill out. In 21st century English, mahlan, not ahlan, mahlan. Calm down, Aisha. Chill out. Surely Allah is kind, and he loves kindness in every situation. Then he said, surely Allah is kind, and he loves kindness. And he gives to the kind person what he doesn't give to the violent person, al-unf. So this hadith proves from the sunnah there is such a thing called rhetorical violence. When people say your words are violent, that is maybe what they say in essence may be exaggeration. But we do believe that words can be violent and words can provoke violence. There's no doubt about it. So she wanted to know, okay, well, what should I say to them if they say anything? He's like, at best, right? If you just say anything back, just basically say, wa alaikum, basically means back at you. It carries meaning, whatever you said to me applies to you. At best, this is the most that was ever said to those people, right? So this is a very important lesson, especially in these times. Now, the adab of ikhtilaf, the manners of disagreement, especially when it comes to politics. Okay? Many things in politics are speculative in nature. Like if we study what's called usul fiqh, you see there are certain things that are qati'i and there are certain things that are dhanni. And it's important for us to know the difference. We can feel very passionate about it. Is it something that's an issue clear of halal, haram, and supporting a candidate or voting for a particular candidate or not voting for a particular candidate? Many times it's not that clear cut. Right? So when we are dealing with things, we have to have space for people, like especially amongst the mu'minin and mu'minat. We have some disagreements. I was talking about the election. We as Muslims should have husnul dhan for each other, unless strongly proven otherwise. So we mentioned from the al-Qawaid al-Kulliyat al-Fiqhiyya, the first maxim or principle that we learn in Islamic sacred law, that there is no earthly reward, no reward in the hereafter illa biniyah, except by intention. So I'm saying this for a reason. Let's use this. I want to make it real for you, right? We have three opinions in our community right now. And we have three groups of people advocating for three different positions. Actually, there's four different positions. I'll lay them out, then I'll explain. I'll explain what I'm talking about. I'm not going to tell you my position. Some of you know my position. There are some people that say the community needs to vote for the vice president to be president. That's one position. Why? This is the so-called lesser than two evils argument. They'll say, oh, well, we don't like her, but we know how 45 is, and we know what 45 did as far as banning 5 Muslim countries of people coming in and calling African countries S-hole countries, and continuing to arm Saudi Arabia and Emirates to bomb Yemen, and putting a blockade, stopping medical supplies coming into Yemen, where tens of thousands of Yemeni children and babies died, and other things, right? They say, well, we know about this guy. So they say this lesser two evils argument. The second argument is, well, she's part of an administration that is giving support to genocide, and there's nothing worse than genocide. So we can't vote for her. At least 45 wasn't overseeing a genocide, and at least 45 will come and sit with us, whereas the vice president refuses to even meet with Palestinian leaders, doesn't meet with the Imma and the Shuyukh. You know, when she comes to Michigan in this community. So the guy says he's going to make peace in the Middle East. So give him a chance, right? What do you have to lose? That's the second opinion. The third opinion is there is no lesser two evils between these two. It's like saying, I don't like Shaitan, so I'm going to vote for Dajjal. They're equally bad. So then you vote for a third party candidate, like Hizbul Akhdar, for instance. Because there's Ashabul Fil, Ashabul Himar, Ashabul Fil, then there's Hizbul Akhdar, or another Hizb, like Dr. Cornel West and Melina Abdullah, or another party, okay? To at least show the Muslim vote that we're still going to vote, and that these people who disrespect us, if they lose the election, they know that they can't ignore us anymore, that they take us seriously. This is a third opinion. The fourth opinion is there's so much shubha in this issue, I'm only going to vote for my local officials and not vote for the president or senator, or I'm not going to vote at all. That's the fourth opinion, right? No matter what opinion that you hold, if we assume and believe that no Muslims love genocide, no Muslim, no matter which way, and these people are making different political calculations because they think that they are mitigating harm, we shouldn't be calling people dal model, or this person's a munafiq, or we cancel someone from the community. I even heard something the other day because one of our shuyukh met with 45 in a picture. He didn't even endorse him. Some people say they weren't going to even go to the masjid that he's the imam at and pray behind him anymore. This is extremism. This is mish adab al-ikhtilafat. This is no manners of disagreement. Sahaba disagreed. Sahaba disagreed on some big things, right? And the one group that left the Jama'ah, we know what they're called, al-Khawarij. So we should not be of a group of those type of people, which the Prophet ﷺ referred to them as kilabun nar. They are the kilab of the hellfire. They're the dogs of the hellfire, right? So we can disagree passionately, but it shouldn't be to the point of calling each other names. We can hold our positions and hold our positions firmly, but it doesn't mean to the point that say we're not going to pray with brothers or sisters anymore. We're not going to give them the rights as a Muslim, the hukuk that they are supposed to have under the Quran and Sunnah. When someone gives you salam, you don't give them salam back. If someone sneezes, say alhamdulillah, you won't tell them yarhamakallah or yarhamakillah. And or if they get sick, you don't even visit them. Like there's certain, if there's an invitation for a wedding, shadi, you won't even go because you disagreed about whether you vote for the orange man, the brown woman, or for another party. Right? We can't be that way. And with people who aren't Muslims, we should be calling people in instead of calling people out. That's our adab with our fellow Americans who aren't Muslims. We're trying to invite them and call them in, not call them out. No one is irredeemable. The Prophet ﷺ never canceled people who weren't Muslims unless they met him on the battlefield and tried to kill him. Then he defended himself. And I'll end with this point. In Jahiliyyah, we're talking about adab of disagreement. Keep this in mind of enjoying good and forbidding evil. I want to make this real for you. In Jahiliyyah, one of the people who committed the worst crimes against the Sahaba was a woman. Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan. She committed one of the worst crimes against the Muslims at the Battle of Uhud. What did she do? She commissioned Washi, who assassinated the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hamza radiallahu anhu. Not only killed him, had his body cut open. Some of his liver was taken out of his body. She picked up his liver, a piece of his liver with blood dripping off of it, and chewed on his liver and spit it out. She hated Muslims and Bani Hashim, the Prophet's family, so much that she did that. Okay, when he came into Fath Mecca, when the Muslims came into Mecca after the Muhajirin had been kicked out of their homes, they came back. What was the first words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? All the Kaaba are safe, all the Abu Sufyan's house are safe, including her, before she even accepted Islam. She later accepted Islam, along with her son Muawiyah. No harm was done to those people. They were pardoned on that day. So I'm trying to paint a picture for you. She wasn't a Muslim. She later became Muslim, but the Prophet ﷺ's heart was so big, despite him seeing his dismembered uncle and crying over top of him. And when the Sahaba said, "O Messenger of God, are you going to curse these people for what they did?" He said, "Allahumma kfirli qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun." Oh God, forgive my people, for surely they don't know better. Oh God, oh Allah, forgive my people. He said, these are my people, even though they were disbelievers, they were enemies. Oh Allah, forgive my people, for surely they don't know. They don't know better. And this is the same methodology of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, Isa alayhi salam. Right? This is the methodology of the prophets. So I will conclude with that. Again, there's adab in our activism, enjoining good and forbidding evil. There is levels of escalation. Take the pardoning, explain and enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. And then when people get incessantly hostile, you disengage with them. Then you look for another route about how to address your grievance. Sometimes it goes past protesting, and sometimes it has to take a legal route. Maybe it goes to filing a lawsuit. Maybe it's some sort of advocacy and voter drives and trying to change legislation. The point is, we don't meet uncouth behavior with uncouth behavior as Muslims. That's other people's methodology. That's not the methodology of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his honorable family members and his righteous companions. and the second generation, the righteous amongst them, and the awliya and salihin. That's not their methodology, and we want to do our activism, living and dying an honorable death upon this prophetic methodology. And may Allah make that so. I will conclude with that. Are there any questions about this chapter or what I covered? Ali.
Is engaging with people who have a different belief than you, would you find that as being beneficial? Like, for example, if a group invites you to discuss a hot topic matter, like let's say the Israeli group invites you, or some other group invites you to discuss a topic on, like, let's say, Palestine and Israel, do you think that situations like that is beneficial?
Okay, so there's different opinions about this, about should we engage people in discussion even we hold starkly different views. Okay, it depends on the circumstances. There is no one answer. So for instance, if you are debating an issue to the public or having a discussion and there's a level playing field or a level debate field and there's a neutral moderator to discuss an issue to the general public, not necessarily to convince them, but there's other people in the public that could get clarification, then in that particular situation, it may be beneficial. But if you're being invited by that organization and they're the ones who are setting the table's going to be set against you. And on debates, discussions like that, I don't go. I learned this lesson the hard way. I went one time on this evangelical radio station. God, it's like 18 years ago or so. It was ran by a guy named Bob Duco, 18 or 19 years ago. It was on this Christian, it's not a regular Christian station. It's like the evangelical, like Pat Robertson type of stations. And the odds and the playing field was stacked against me. Another time I went on Fox News, a similar thing happened, right? So, and also they'll play games with you. They'll cut you off, even like on TV. You'll have the earbud in there. It's like they lowered the volume. I asked them to lower the volume. They wouldn't lower it, so I could barely hear. So I'm trying to understand. And then because it's low, then it causes you to raise your voice. So it makes it sound like I'm yelling to be heard, and then I can't hear. So people play games is my point, right? So it's on a case-by-case basis, right? And it's always good that when you're invited as an individual, as a student group, that, as I mentioned before, to always take mashura or shura, take some sort of consultation, check with your elders and with your student group to see if it's the right venue to engage. Sometimes it's also not wise to engage because sometimes engagement could signal de facto agreement or even normalization with a particular party that holds a particular horrible position. For instance, I would never go and have a debate with David Duke, or let's say the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan of Michigan. I'm not going to sit down and have a debate with that guy, not as an African American. Why would I do that? I'm not going to even give legitimacy to the KKK as being the KKK. To me, is a terrorist organization, right? Our laws are a funny style in America because the terrorism laws only relate to foreign entities. That's why the KKK is not designated as a terrorist organization. But that's the most prolific terrorist organization in American history, right? I'm not going to even legitimize the discussion by even trying to get into a debate with the KKK, for instance. And there's other groups like that too. And Allah knows best. Brothers or sisters, any other comments or questions before we conclude? Are you all registered to vote who are old enough to vote? Yeah. Have any of you voted early yet? I'm going to go vote tomorrow with my wife, inshallah. I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for. but some of you know. Anyway, any other questions or comments about the adab of enjoining good and forbidding evil? We're here next week, right? Even though it's election day. I mean, we can. There's no school. No school. Okay, so we're not here next week, so we'll meet the following week. So if you don't vote early, please go out and vote. And also, as I mentioned earlier, and I have to say this, that at this particular time, with so much fitan in the ummah and Palestine, with Lebanon, with Yemen, with Sudan, other places, this is a time when you should try to wake up at least no less than a half an hour before Fajr prayer, make wudu and pray tahajjud. It should be all your part of your spiritual routine, and make dua for this ummah, right? And this is the best time. This is the last third of the night in which the rahmah of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala descends. This is the time of waqt du'a mustajab. It is the time the Prophet ﷺ and the righteous of this community said this is the time in which the pleas and the cries of the believers are answered when they wake up at that early part of the morning before the break of dawn. So that should be part of each and every one of your spiritual routine. And with that, I will conclude. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallam. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.